Okay, this video is a quick benchmark for my attempted raster scanner. So I switched over from a raster scanner. This is about my fourth design for an RGB laser projector. My third design involved one of these analog PID calculator boards, as well as a scratch-built galvanometer. This used, I believe, 37 or 38 gauge electromagnet wire. It uses an iron core, which was machined from an iron rod. And then inside all of that goes a 1/8 inch diametrically magnetized rod. So the electromagnet wires run parallel to the rod. The rod has to be oriented such a way, and then when you run current through the wires, then of course they apply torque to the rod and it accelerates. You can get pretty decent performance out of it, but for what I wanted to do, it's not good enough. I want to do lidar scanning. Well, first off, I want to do RGB light shows. Then I want to be able to do lidar scanning and potentially SLS. So that's not feasible because it has such a limited scanning angle. So I switched over to this. I pulled this out of an old printer I got from Goodwill. And it's just a basic raster scanner. Now, I've run into a couple issues here, and I'll demonstrate them. The main issue I run into is jitter in the system, so you'll see this in a second when I turn it all on. These lasers are a hazard, so I tend to leave them unplugged. But essentially you can see there's a fair amount of jitter involved. Now, I measured the system with an oscilloscope, and essentially what I did was I had a 2-channel oscilloscope, and I measured one pin attached to the photodiode and one pin attached to the output pin on the ESP32. I changed the code so it was just a void loop that would continuously pulse the output on and off for every time the silicon photodiode surpassed the threshold condition. And what that revealed was that the ESP32 reacts much faster than it needs to. Well, it reacts very quickly, which is good. So the problem doesn't seem to be on the ESP32 side. I have a couple theories. One of them was that perhaps there's an inconsistency with the TTL driver. This is a very cheap TTL board. After all, I bought this on AliExpress. And the TTL board has a PWM frequency of 35 kilohertz, which sounds like a lot, but for a raster scanning system, you have to pulse it very, very quickly because it's continuously scanning right to left. With a galvo system, because it stops at positions, for example, if you wanted to project a dot, the galvo would stop at the dot and then you could just turn it on and off. But here you'd have to pulse it at full intensity for, a few microseconds. And that adds problems because, of course, the rise time isn't enough. The reason I think this adds a problem is because it may have to do with the capacitors. Perhaps I'm drawing power from them when they aren't fully charged because I'm trying to pulse it faster than 35 kilohertz. That was my one theory. It could just be the cheap driver board. The other theory was maybe something's introducing electrical noise. I did notice during the oscilloscope test there was some kind of weird effect, I don't know what to call it, that came from measuring the silicon photodiode. Apart from that, I don't really know what it could be. I don't think random program interrupts can account for this because the board is just so fast.